This time I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you please stand. And if I can ask, let's see, our tax collector is a very difficult person. Pledge of allegiance this evening, Scott. Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we remain standing, and Chief Curran will prayer, please.
As we begin our May meeting and approaching the Memorial Day, let us remember our soldiers, for a nation that forgets its defenders will itself be forgotten. It is with the unspoken words of John F. Kennedy to be delivered in Dallas in 1963 that we remember. As our power grows, so has our peril. We give our thanks for the ideals of honor and faith we inherit from our forefathers, for all the decency of purpose, steadfastness of resolve, and strength of will, for the courage and the humility which they possessed and which we must seek to emulate as we express our gratitude. We must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Let us therefore proclaim our gratitude to Providence for manifold blessings. Let us be humble, thankful for inherited ideals, and let us resolve to share the blessings of liberty and those ideals which are fellow human beings throughout the world. As we celebrate this month of remembrance, we pray that God holds our fallen heroes and their families in His hand and continues to guide us as we renew our commitment to our city. We continue to pray for the safe return of our men and women in service around the world today. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chief. Clerk, please call the roll.
Curran.
Here.
Cadet.
Here.
Knapp.
Here.
Davey.
Present.
Seabury.
Here.
Stanley. Taylor. Cola.
Here.
Hagershon.
Present.
Morrissey.
Here.
Ellis.
Here.
Cabo.
Present.
Sadi. Visconti. Wetmore.
Present.
Nero.
Here.
Perkins. Shanice. Fratello.
Here.
Scottafava.
Here.
Dykstra. Present.
There being 20 present, one absent, let the record reflect that Mr. Taylor is sick. I don't think he'll make it tonight, but I know he's going to try. But it's under the weather. The first 30 minutes of each council meeting are reserved for public speaking. I ask any member of the council that wishes to address the council, any member of the public that wishes to address the council this evening, please do so about an item that is specifically on the agenda, and you must be a resident and or taxpayer of the city of Danbury to address the council. With that, is there any member of the council that wishes to address this man?
Sydney McFadden, I'm a resident of
Cindy,
Danbury.
if you could use the microphone, please, and just state your address for the record.
I just wanted to introduce myself to you guys because I'm actually leaving town. I live on Pleasant Street. It's a beautiful neighborhood. The agenda item I want to speak about is the work that Sean Stillman does with the unit.
What
the Unit 5.
What number of Pleasant Street, just so we have?
Number 10.
Number 10, thank you.
You know, I have a decade of issues with Pleasant Street, and the most recent is the organized sports games that are taking place on the weekends, and traffic is snarled, and they're selling hot dogs, and they're registering for teams, and they're getting shirt colors for their different teams. The playoffs are in September or October. You know, it's the second week now that it started. And, you know, I know you guys are trying to shut down these neighborhood games. They don't belong in the neighborhood. And I just want to ask you, please, to take an idea of mine and run with it. Give parking permits to the owners at Pleasant Street. Maybe only have half a dozen parking permits for parking on the street because, you know, 30, 40 people live in these homes. And the cops can ticket the cars. You know, it'll make it worth the police coming up. You know, a fire truck couldn't get to a house on Pleasant Street on Sunday. And you know, what's one cop going to do against 300 people playing sports? I mean, residents. What's he supposed to do? He's by himself. You know, at least get some authority to have them give tickets for parking on the lawn, you know? Make the permit violation be $250 so it's worth it for the cop to write the ticket, make some money for the city. You know, he's gonna spend a couple of hours with 300 cars. And there had to be 300 people. And this is ongoing. And I've spoken with Sean before, and you know, we have been working toward the resolution, but this last weekend just took the cake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate your time. Any other member of the public wish to address the council this evening? Mr. Lloyd?
Good evening. I'm Charlie O'Boyle. My address is 16 Lower Lake Road. I'm here this evening because I wanted to, again, talk to you about the current budget that I think we're going to vote on this evening. I was here on the first council meeting after you all first received the mayor's proposed budget, and asked you to please consider reducing the increase and bringing up the fact that if you were in private government or private business, you wouldn't even be able to do this. You'd have to just work with the money you had. I want to mention this evening. I know it won't matter. I know you've already made up your minds. You're going to vote. We'll all have a 3.5% tax increase. Okay. Last year you did the same thing. So we're up to 7% in 2 years. It's a heck of a glide path. There's another glide path you want to take a look at. And that's the devaluation of all of our houses. Mine's gone down $50,000 in 2 years. So if you think that there's a report card for all of you, it's out there right now. 7.5% increase, $50,000 decrease. It's a heck of a report card, isn't it? It says you're all failing. You need to do something about it. I know. There's nothing you can do about the unions. There's nothing you can do about education. There's just nothing you can do about anything. Doesn't sound right to me. If it was happening in your house, if the plumbing blew up, if something caught on fire, I mean, you'd act, right? Well, financially, things are happening. You guys will run a credit card. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'm a resident. My name is Nicholas Marino. I live at 13 Pleasant Street. And I wanted to mention that I work retail. I come home on Sunday afternoon about 5 o'clock. And there was no place for me to even park my car. I got into the house, and from my deck you can see this yard with all these people, and they had speakers out there, and they were screaming out the scores. And there was no way that I could physically even be outside of my own house at 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, let alone if I invited anyone to my home. I want to remind everyone also that the same house that's having these parties, a child was killed just a few years ago, was run over in the driveway.
Another one's gonna die with a soon.
One at a time.
Sorry.
And I tried, I had to go out, and they had a lawn truck that was double parked, and kids were running from every side of the street. I had to physically stop my car and wait, and then inch out just to get out, so that nothing would happen. Something has to be done. This has been going on for years, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any other members of the public wish to address the council this evening? I think only get one shot at it.
I just want to support Nick and say, you know, Pleasant Street, you guys own it, an historical overlay.
Yeah, we know, Cynthia. We hear you, and I'm not diminishing, but I've talked to Sean tonight about this issue. We're going to be out there and see what we can do to help you out. Okay?
Thank you very much. I'm going to leave you alone now.
No, you're not.
No, I got things to do.
I'll make sure she leaves the building.
Sorry, I'm ready for all the calls to your office.
office.
No, that's where you're close.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm not going to speak on Pleasant Street. Ken Guthrie, 19 Mayor Road. A number of things. Number 14, I think I spoke on this earlier, which is the sewer tax. I still don't understand the way the rating is figured out for the flat rate. What I do find a little bit disturbing is that with the ordinance, is that if you have city water and city sewer, the minimum they can charge you is half of what it would cost you for flat rates. In other words, if you hook up to the city water and you use it, your rates actually are cheaper than actually having a flat rate. I understand why the rates are where they're at when they're only using half of the service that the city offers. Next one, and every time I talk on this, I feel like I'm kicking a little puppy. Item 13. The capital improvement projects. The Ives Authority Pavilion. The reason why I have it, the Ives Authority, the problem I have with the Ives Authority over the years has been, when they came in front of this council about 4 or 5 years ago, I'm not exactly sure when they first came up, they came up in front of the council and said, we need a one-time only $50,000, get us over the hump, you'll never hear from us again. Please help us out. We gave it to them, and they've been back every year since. But we not only went from giving the initial $50,000, we bought equipment for them. We wound up buying the land that was going to be foreclosed on that was in that area, and we've had it in the budget ever since. I don't know how we went from having this authority just becoming part of the budget to where, with what's happening with this budget, we're looking at over $600,000 invested into something that I don't think we own. I mean, we have an interest in, but we don't own this. And now we're talking about taking another $75,000 to repair a building that's not ours. And I find this hard when we have other things in the city, like we're cutting the school budget, we're keeping teacher salaries from actually getting rate increase raises and things of that sort, to where we're going to this special interest. It's not ours. I don't understand why we keep doing this. And I don't understand why it's in the budget yet again this year. Lastly is, of course, the budget. There's a lot of things in here that are really questionable. It'll probably take all night to go item by item to really go through everything. I don't understand why Corporation Council is increasing their budget by $54,000. I mean, it's one of the highest numbers. Everything in City Hall seems to be going down and down. Corporation Council is climbing, climbing, climbing. We're looking at a $54,000 increase just in Corporation Council alone. I'm not sure how we can budget the police department. We don't have a contract yet. So what do we know the numbers are going to be at? We can't really go along with that.
We have a contract. We have a contract.
I spoke to police officers last night and they said the contract's not done.
The contract's done.
Okay.
It's been voted on by the city council and the membership. We have hired.
Well, then I'm mistaken there.
It's fire, we don't.
But, you know, I get a little disheartened when I look at, say, Public Works, and one of the reasons for an increase for their expenditures is the amount of gas or what fuel's costing, which I understand. Everybody's going through this higher gas prices. But when I drive down to my shop in Shelton, and I pass the city of Danbury truck coming up from New Haven at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm wondering, why do we have vehicles down there? Why are we taking care of that? So it starts to open up questions of why we have things the way they are. I mean, Forestry Department, I see that their budget went down. That's kind of nice, but I think after the last storm we had in October, maybe we need to increase them and get more of them out there to take care of some of these problems before they happen. I mean, it goes on and on. So really, I urge you to take a good hard look at this budget. I know many of you already have your minds made up, but it's not a good one. And I urge you to vote it down. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to address the council this evening? There's one.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, Jim Maloney, 15 Worcester Heights, Danbury, Connecticut. I am a resident and taxpayer of the city of Danbury. First of all, I want to start by thanking you for doing what you do. There are a number of us in this room, obviously in the dais, who have been in public life. And we know it's not easy. You get pushed from every side, from left, from right, from top, from bottom, and you do the best you can. I know that, right? And I appreciate that, and I thank the mayor for what he's done for the Head Start program and for other services in the city over the course of time.
Did you say that again?
Yes, sir. I believe it's on tape. In fact, it's on film, Mayor. But I am here because I really am concerned about the direction we're going. This year, because of the superintendent and his staff, they did an amazing job on negotiating the health and costs for the Board of Ed. The projected increase was 5%. They ended up with a decrease of 5%. That's a swing of 10%. That's more than $1 million swing. They did an amazing job. And they pulled the rabbit out of the hat. That rabbit won't be there next year. The governor's putting $1.7 million extra money, we believe, into Danbury's education budget. That rabbit won't be here next year. So I truly submit to you, we're not only out of rabbits in Danbury, we're also out of hats. All right? And we really have to think about what's happening. 5 years ago, in 2009, the education budget of the city of Danbury represented 7% of the total city budget. This year it's 52.7. That's a swing of about $5 or $6 million. And it shows, you know, you've heard from the education people, it shows they've cut and cut and cut. Last year it was freshman sports. This year it's Head Start. Okay? Now I think, as I said, the rabbit was pulled out of the hat. I think we're over the hump this year. But boy, we are heading in difficult times. And the mayor's right, I've heard him say this publicly, that he has to consider all of the people in the city of Danbury, he has to consider the people whose houses are being foreclosed and all of those issues. Right? I agree with that. But let me tell you, the education budget didn't cause that problem. And cutting the education budget isn't going to solve that problem. In fact, I'll close with the thought that it's the other way around. There are 8 big cities in the state of Connecticut. 5 of them are in big trouble, financially and educationally. 3 of them are holding their own, Danbury, Norwalk, Stanford. Why? Because their education program is strong. You can go to the public schools in Stanford, you can go to the public schools in Norwalk, you can go to the public schools in Danbury, and you can get a solid education. 2 of my girls graduated from Danbury High. My oldest went to Tufts University and George Washington Law School. My middle daughter went to Villanova and she's planning on going to graduate school. You can get a quality education at Danbury High. And that keeps your property values up, not down, keeps your property values up. And it keeps the city of Danbury the kind of city we need, the kind of city we want, the kind of city we've been blessed with for generations. And I'm here to say, we're at the edge of going in the wrong direction. So for your consideration. Thank you very much.
Any other members of the public wish to address the council this evening? Seeing none, then we'll move on with our regularly scheduled meeting. I have a number of announcements I just want to quickly go over for the council and for the public at large. First of all, May 6th is Fred Visconti's birthday. Fred, happy birthday. May 10th is Mike Haddad's birthday. Mike, May 12th is Mike Haddad's wedding anniversary. So he's got a couple of items I just want to share with you that are on the agenda that I want to highlight. May 3rd is the Connecticut DCF Luncheon. It's National Foster Care Month, so there'll be a cafe on the green from 12 noon to 3 p.m. May 3rd also, Dave's R&D Center is getting a customer satisfaction award, so we want to support our local businesses. May 3rd is also the evening Beckley Company host the spaghetti dinner. May 4th is Law Day in the city of Danbury, the Danbury Bar Association. Of course, May 5th is Cinco de Mayo. And it's also opening day, right, Mike, at Danbury Youth Baseball. And that will be at 11:30 a.m. We also have the Ecuadorian Civic Center Soccer Championship League. They start at 11 a.m. on Sunday. May 8th is a hospice breakfast. You can see your page, many different things. May 9th is Antonio's Public Works Awareness Day. So you have to go to that because he's so proud of all of his toys. And also, it's great for the kids. How many students did you have there last year?
About 125.
125 Danbury Public School students go around about public works and get to ride the tractors. It's a lot of fun. May 10th is the Rotary Club's Fireman and Policeman of the Year. And May 11th is the Danbury Veterans Council Recognition Night at the Danbury's Lake Club. The West County graduation, that is the master's degree graduates. The 13th is their large graduation. May 15th is Friends of Richter Park Breakfast. That's an important event. We're honoring Ken Green this year as a fundraiser for Richter Park, their 501c3. May 15th is the annual ROTC Awards Banquet. In addition to that, May 28th, I'll skip forward a little bit, is actually May 23rd is the Danbury Police Department Awards Ceremony. Chief, that takes place at the headquarters in the community room. Clean City Danbury is May 19th. Fred's already volunteered to work, right, Fred? You work in Rogers Park, right? All day, right? Amen? All right, and all of our council people will be spread out throughout the city, helping out our residents as we pick up the city. We also are still recruiting clean teams, so if you know an organization, Boy Scouts, service organization, whatever, that wants to participate in this pickup, we encourage you to do that. In addition to that, Memorial Day Parade is May 28th. That begins at 9:30 a.m. step off. If you really want to do the whole thing, you can meet us at St. Joseph's Church at 6 a.m. for the Mass, and then we go around the city to all the various memorials and pay our respects to our veterans and their commitment. I just want to mention, because it falls before the next meeting, June 3rd is Portuguese Day in the city of Danbury, our annual flag raising and parade. They're still working on the Portuguese Cultural Center, so we haven't quite got the picnic back yet, so we are going to have a good time. And you're welcome to join me down here in Memorial Field, 8 a.m. for the flag raising, and then we'll move over for the Mass, and then we'll begin the parade. That in no way is all the events that are taking place in the month of May. There's an extensive list in front of you. For any information about this, you might want to contact Lisa in my office, and she can give you more details as to what the best time is to go. Just so that, I do have a special announcement tonight. Over the weekend, a council member here in the city of Danbury, his family was recognized for their work with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. So I prepared a mayor's proclamation. If I can have your indulgence, I can present it to that family. It says, City of Danbury Mayor's Proclamation. We hereby know to all the mayor and the citizens of the city of Danbury honor the Hallis family for their commitment to the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And whereas on April 28, 2012, Danbury's Hallis family received a distinguished honor of being named one of the Fairfield County Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation's Gala honorees. And whereas the Hallis family has provided the Fairfield County JDRF with significant support and contributions for many years, bringing important awareness and support for juvenile diabetes and its research. Hallis Farm Market on Pembroke Road runs a successful pumpkin painting fundraiser. It's a great time. I encourage you to go. Well done. Every October at the farm, a tradition in our community for many years. And so tonight we celebrate this honor with Councilman Michael Hallis and his family, and we recognize them for their dedication and commitment to the JDRF. I also want to thank Laura Hallis as well for all their work. So therefore, it brings out that I, Mark D. Mountain, as mayor of the city of Danbury, we hereby honor Councilman Michael Hallis, his wife Laura, and their entire family for their devotion to JDRF and to families who are affected by juvenile diabetes. Signed this first day of May 2012 in the City Hall, my signature and the seal of the great city of Danbury. So Michael, thank you for that. With that, we'll move on with our meeting. Mr. President, can we have the minutes, please?
Your Honor, thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we waive the reading of the minutes as all members have copies, and copies are on file in the Legislative Assistant's office.
Second. Motion made, second by Mr. Daggerstedt. Are there any changes, corrections, or deletions to the minutes as presented? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds for acceptance of the minutes. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, signify by saying nay. Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. Mr. Majority Leader, may we have the consent calendar, please?
Mr. May, consent calendar for May 1st, 2012 reads as follows. Number 1, receive communication to confirm the appointment of Michael Esposito, Republican, as member of the Environmental Impact Commission, with a term to expire December 1st, 2015. Number 2, receive the communication to confirm the appointment of Edward Moore Jr., Democrat, as a member of the Conservation Commission with a term to expire July 1st, 2015. Number 5, receive the communication to approve the disposal of surplus vehicles and miscellaneous equipment pursuant to the requirements set forth by Section 2-153 of the Code of Ordinances. Number 9, receive the communication and adopt a resolution that will allow the City of Danbury Health Department to apply for and accept funding from the State of Connecticut Department of Public Health for the Preventative Health and Human Services Block Grant. Number 10, receive a report of the city engineer signal action on the sanitary sewer extension at Riders Lane and Southern Boulevard, area project number 05-14. Number 11, receive a communication to adopt a resolution authorizing the listed agencies to apply for and accept funding in the form of tax credits from the state of Connecticut through the Neighborhood Assistance Act. And that serves as consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. What's your pleasure, council? You got anything, Mr. Knapp?
Thank you, Your Honor. Make a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented.
Second. Motion made and seconded by Mr. Perkins. All in favor of the consent calendar, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, signify by saying nay. Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. Madam Clerk, items 1 and 2 are on consent. Item 2, please.
Communication, amendment to Court of Ordinances, Section 6-1A, withholding approvals and delinquencies. Dear Mayor and council members, attached you will find a proposed amendment to the section of our Code of Ordinances that presently permits the withholding of building applications where someone is delinquent on a variety of payments to the city, such as taxes or utilities. As is consistent with state law allowing such withholdings, we seek to clarify the portion of this section that defines what may be held in the event of such delinquency. This will now include all building approvals from the initial building application to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy. While we feel that this has always been the intent of this section, it is best to clarify and set it forth in clear language. The building department and the city permit center typically coordinate such approvals and will work together in implementing the change, consistent with present practices. Please refer this to committee and/or public hearing for further consideration. Very truly yours, Laszlo L. Pinter, Deputy Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's your pleasure, council? Mr. Council.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to refer item number 3, Code of Ordinance, Section 6-1A, withholding approvals and delinquency, to a public hearing.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion that is related to referring this to public? Mr. Whittle.
Thank you, Your Honor. Through the chair to the Corporation Council.
Thank you.
Mr. Pinter, in our agenda on section 3-2, there seems to be, and I just want to get this on the floor before we go to public hearing with this, there seems to be an implied confusion between the body of the ordinance and the title of the ordinance, because the title of the ordinance, the underlying capital, says approvals where the applicant is delinquent, and the body seems to suggest we're talking about the property. So if you can clear that up, I appreciate it.
It will clear it up if there's any confusion at all. That's the applicant.
Say it again, Mr. Pinto, I couldn't hear.
It will clear it up if there's any confusion prior to the public hearing, but it would be the applicant who's delinquent.
So if the applicant has a basket of properties, and one of those properties is delinquent, we're going to withhold permits for all properties? Is that what we're saying?
Well, we're going to, it's the applicant who owns that property, that particular property. But we've got to tie it to the applicant, because it's the applicant who will be submitting whatever request they're submitting, so we have to tie it to the applicant. We'll clear up any confusion about that to make sure that the applicant is tied into the property.
Okay, so it's if I may, the property's tied to the applicant, but we're still talking about a petition in the singular. In other words, somebody could, property C could be in arrears, but to improve property H. And if he's just doing property H and not property C, this would not apply. Is that essentially correct?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, then, all in favor of referring to public hearing, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, item 4.
Communication investment policy statement.
What's your pleasure, counsel? Mrs. Stanley?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to refer this, send this to an ad hoc to include Corporation Counsel and the Director of Finance.
Ad hoc committee shall consist of the following. Mr. Levy will be in the chair. We'll put, let's see who's got time to take a nap. And how about Mr. Cheney's? Have fun with this. It'll be a test later. Okay. Madam Clerk, item 5 was I consent. Also, I just want to be clear that we have Director of Finance will be there. And Corporation. Item 5 was on consent. Madam Clerk, item 6.
Communication application for deferral of assessment increase for Limo Air Controls Incorporated.
Would you pleasure, counsel? Mr. Negusha.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to refer this to an ad hoc with Corporation Counsel, the Director of Planning, Director of Economic Development, Director of Finance, and a representative from the Mayor's Office.
Ad hoc shall consist of the following. Mr. Cabo in the chair, Mr. Darcy, and Mr. Visconti. Item 7, please.
Resolution, Carthagena Castle, grant application to Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. To Mayor Bartley, members of the council, from Dennis Alpert. Attached for your review and approval is a resolution authorizing Mayor Bartley to apply for a grant from the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. The application is for grant funds for community/historic action plans to hire a multidisciplinary team to fashion a realistic strategy for restoration of Hartstone Castle and to analyze potential future uses which will complement activities of Terry Wall Park. The planning study will consist of 3 phases. 1, an update of previous evaluations of the castle and budget estimates to repair, stabilize, and secure the castle to prevent its further deterioration, and a market analysis of potential users and fundraising strategies. Number 2, preliminary plans for opening the castle for limited use. And 3, a complete needs assessment and cost estimates to fully restore the castle and grounds. The study will provide the basis for a capital campaign to raise funds for restoration work. The grant, if approved, will be administered by the Department of Planning and Zoning. A team of representatives from the Terry Wall Park Authority, Friends of Terry Wall Park, and the Danbury Museum and Historical Society will join the department in reviewing the planning study. Public outreach will be an integral part of the process. We anticipate that the study will take about 9 months to complete. We are requesting funding from the trust in the amount of $50,000. We are also requesting from City Council approval to provide, if needed, additional funding up to $5,000 toward the cost of the study, plus in-kind services, including access to its professional planning staff, contract administration, and invoice processing. This application is contingent upon approval by City Council, anticipated at your May meeting, and certification of funding by the Finance Director. A resolution is being prepared by Corporation Counsel under separate cover.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's your pleasure, counsel? Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to accept the communication and adopt the resolution to authorize the mayor, Mark Bowden, or Dennis Alpert as his designee, to apply for and accept funding from the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation.
Second. Motion made, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Discussion related to this grant application. Mr. Rappel.
If I may, through the chair, to Director Alpern. You know, $5,000 is a small price to pay to maintain or stabilize or hopefully even restore this asset, which is one of the most important assets in the park system. But at this point, there really is not much to stabilize. I mean, the interior, the roof is in the basement. Stabilizing might be keeping the walls from collapsing at this point. What's the plan? Where are we going with this? It's in bad shape.
Well, I know it's in bad shape. What we want to do is determine what it would take just to get it. And this is number one in our 3 phases of the study. And it's front-loaded, admittedly. We want to determine what it would take just by the word stabilize. I mean, to put it in a position where it's not going to deteriorate any further and where it is safe and secure. That may mean some work.
I think if I could just give you some background on this, Mr. Rotella, I was approached by this organization and who have been very rare in the castle. And we spent probably a good couple hours in the office with the representatives of the Historic Trust, kicking around the castle in general. And really it became very clear that while we have a master plan, as you know, you guys funded that for Terrywile several years ago, we don't have a plan for the castle. And really this is just about developing a strategic plan for the castle. How are we going to use it? For what purposes? And then how much is all they're going to cost? Similar to what we did with Palace Theater. But right now, because we can't apply for, we don't know what we're going to do with the castle, it's hard to apply for money because the first thing they ask is, what are you going to do with it? You want to go over and kind of want this? So the idea here is to use this money to survey the community, to say, okay, what do you want to do with this particular asset, as you mentioned, and how best can we utilize it, given the fact that the roof's in the basement, given the fact that it's severely deteriorated, given the fact that there are utilities there, and a whole bunch of other things. And I think the plan at the end will be able to accommodate those problems.
So if I may, that perhaps the information that we gleaned from going to the community may dictate the type of restoration we would undertake.
I just want to be clear to the council. This does not mean we're going to completely rebuild the entire castle. It could come back and they could say that this ought to be an observation tower. And, you know, and we'll clean it out, take the roof out, and shore it up.
Thank you.
What we need to do is determine first what kind of uses you want to put this castle to. So when you go further on and take a look at restoration efforts, those restoration efforts will support those kinds of uses that you have selected. So you pick the use first, then you take a look at the structure itself. Okay. Now we're going to do all 3. And if we find that the total price for a complete restoration is, well, I don't want to say it's too much. It's going to be high.
It's a lot.
It's going to be just be straight.
But we also know that Terrywile now has an organization, it's a 501c3, called the Friends of Terrywile Park, and they are very interested in starting a capital campaign to raise private funds to help offset the total cost of restoration. But we don't know what any of that is, the mayor pointed out. We don't have a strategy yet.
Yeah, you know, I think we'd all love to see a restoration, but very few of us would like to pay for it, so.
It's been the story of this government in the 24 years that I've been here, and it's a sad story. Because at first, when I first came here 24 years ago, Rick Alonzo took me out to the castle, and we went inside, we walked around, we went upstairs. There was a little bit of problem in the ceiling. You could see some water damage. And it would have been very inexpensive to stop that. But nobody wanted to pay a nickel. And now look what we have. We have millions of dollars of restoration work that we're facing. We just purposely let it, well, I should say purposely, benign neglect, let it fall apart.
You know, it's a history lesson, but not to put too fine a point on it. When the property was sold to the city, there were people living in the castle. It was occupied.
I know that.
Okay, I think we're way into the weeds here.
Thank you, Mr. Elbert. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Elbert. Any other discussion related to the grant application? Mr. Levy.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was looking back, and Dennis knows I'm pretty familiar over the years with the castle. The thing that probably will get my yes vote is that this is a capital fund, that they want to raise the money on their own rather than city money. But the report I have from 2004 was $1 million at that time to stabilize it. So, but on the basis that this would be private funds.
It may not be entirely. I can't.
I think we're like way putting the cart before the horse. Let's just see what the report says before we talk about how we're going to fund it, and whether it'll be public dollars used or not. I mean, my suspicion is whether it's this administration or future administrations, other projects would take a much higher priority over than the castle. That's always been the dilemma, right? You got to build bridges, you got to build schools. We don't have a couple $1 million to throw into the castle. But Friends has agreed that they would try and develop a capital campaign. They're actively raising money already. Let's see what the report says and we can make some decisions. I'm not cutting you off, Mr. Lee, I just don't want to, I think it's premature to say how you're going to fund the repairs when we're not sure how we're going to use the castle. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none then, I'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Madam Clerk, item 8, please.
Resolution. FEMA Fire Prevention and Study Grant. Honorable Mark Fountain, from Council, from David St. Hilaire, Director of Finance. Attached for your review is a resolution that will allow the City of Danbury Fire Department to apply for and accept funding from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is FEMA, through its Fire Prevention and Safety Grant Program. This fire department plans to use awarded funds to assist the Community Risk Reduction Division in education and safety enhancement activities. The maximum funding for this grant will not exceed $200,000. FEMA funds 80% of the total grant, which is $160,000, and the city will be responsible for funding 20%, which is $40,000. If awarded, required city funding will be available in the fiscal year 2012 and 2013, and fiscal year 2013 and 14 departmental budget. The City Council is respectfully requested to consider this resolution at its next meeting. Please contact me should you require any additional information.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With the pleasure of council, Mr. Wetmore.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution to allow the Danbury Fire Department to apply for and accept funding from FEMA through its Fire Prevention and Safety Grant Program.
Motion made and seconded by Councilman Visconti. Discussion under the FEMA grant. Mr. Shinesi.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a question to the Director of Finance. When it says city is responsible for the 20% budget in this current, would be in the fiscal year 12-13, so that would be the budget we'd be focusing on coming on. Is that funding already in the budget?
They have enough room in the budget to absorb that $20,000 for this coming year and for next year. If they're awarded that grant, because what happens is you can reposition some funds to accommodate that.
If you're not awarded it, what happens to the 20,000 then?
No, because those funds, his resources would be allocated somewhere else. I mean, it's not straight, it's not a straight grant for,
that's what I was calling it.
Respirator.
Right. So you can allocate some resources that are currently being expended to this cause, for this grant. So it'd be matching funds. So these funds are currently being spent, but you would reallocate it for this next summer.
Thank you, Mr. Shinesi. Any other discussion? And then I'll try your minds on the FEMA grant. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Item 9 was consent, 10 was consent, 11 is on consent. Madam Clerk, item 12.
And 12, ordinance and resolution. An ordinance making appropriations for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2012 and ending June 30th, 2013, and a resolution levying the property tax for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2012 and ending June 30th, 2013.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's your pleasure, council? Mr. Cabo.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we waive the reading of the government, the budget report, as all members have copies, and copies are on file in the legislative assistant's office.
Second. The motion's been made by Mr. Cabo, seconded by Mr. Negushev, to waive the reading of the reports. All those in favor of waiving the reading of reports, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. At this time, we'll entertain a motion regarding General Government 1 budget report. Mr. Cabo.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we receive the General Government 1 Budget Committee report and adopt the recommendations as presented. Second.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Negushev. Is there discussion under General Government 1 budget report? Mr. Sack.
Thank you, Your Honor. Under General Government 1, I was on that ad hoc committee. I voted in the negative, and will be voting negative on this item. However, I will hold my substantive comments regarding the budget overall to the final motion, as I understand it, be on the actual ordinance making the appropriations.
Thank you. Any further discussion with General Government 1? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on acceptance of General Government 1. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Mr. Sade, Mr. Nero, Mr. Perkins, Mr. O'Connor. Okay, Madam Clerk, Council General Government 2 budget report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion that the council receive the report from the General Government 2 Budget Committee and adopt the recommendations presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Mrs. Dyschels. Discussion as it relates to General Government 2 budget report. Discussion related to General Government 2 budget report. Remember, you'll have time to discuss the general budget overall later on. Seeing none, then, all in favor of acceptance of this report, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those in the negative, raise your hand, please. Mr. Lottello, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Nero, and Mr. Sack. Item C, education budget report. Mr. Seaver.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to receive the committee report and adopt the committee's recommendations as presented.
Motion's been made and seconded by Mrs. Stanley. Discussion related to education budget report. Education budget report. Mr. Sack.
My apologies. I spoke too soon, Your Honor, and I'll hold all my comments to the main motion at the end. I do have a question, Your Honor, to the chair, more to the chair, possibly through the chair to the Director of Finance. I was recently on a Board of Education workshop and budget meeting, budget discussion meeting, following the workshop, and there was discussion of the $1.7 million that Mr. Malone is receiving potentially from the governor's budget. There were a lot of contingencies related to the line of state money. But there was a statement that the mayor has said, or the city has said, that if this money, either in whole or in part, is not forthcoming, that the city will make that up. And I didn't ask any questions or bring that up at that meeting, but just wondering if that is accurate, or that's maybe a slight, I would say, inflation of maybe what our statements, or your statement was.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, Mr. Sadi. Let me just say, Mr. Sadi is referring to the 1.7. Depending on state dollars, depending on who you talk to, it's either referred to as alliance money or conditional funding districts. They still haven't resolved that. I think they'll have a bill by the end of the week as it relates to this. I met personally with the governor. I also met with the Commissioner of Education related to this money. With all due respect to Mr. Maloney, this is a 5-year commitment for this money. This isn't just a one-shot deal. In fact, it's the intention, notwithstanding today's news about the deficit, it is the intention to add to those dollars each year.
So the governor's calling this a down payment on future money to the city of Danbury and the other alliance districts. There are some conditions in terms of how you can use this money. We spent a lot of time reviewing the process and what would qualify and what wouldn't qualify. It is clear to me that qualifying dollars would be what they call a net new activity. It does not mean, though, a net new program. But it does mean you got to do something a little bit differently than you've done before. And I kind of understand that and actually support that concept because what the governor is saying, what the administration is saying is that we want accountability for the new money we're getting. Keep in mind also that money goes directly to the Board of Ed. It does not come through our accounts here at the city of Danbury. And it's done in monthly installments, consistent with the school improvement plan that we'll be filing later in the month of May once the legislature is in session, out of session. So that's sort of how they view that. Now, to your point, to your question, as it relates to, well, this whole harmless thing, let's say that the Board of Ed goes up and for whatever reason, the commissioner says, I'm only going to give you 1.5 million. I don't think we'll do that, but let's say that's what happens. Then it will be up to Mr. St. Hilaire and I to work closely with Ed and the team over at the Board of Ed. How do we get them all up to the 1.7, which they're trying to work on? That won't take the form of a blanket check to the Board of Ed. We're not going for that. What we are saying to them is we recognize the uncertainty about this money. We may have to rewrite this school improvement plan a couple of times to meet the needs of what they're looking for in their mind. But I think after meeting with them, I feel they're comfortable that we'll more than qualify for that money, mainly because we'll show net new activity, but also because we're already doing a lot of things that they're asking for in other communities that aren't doing it. So we'll be able to really strut our stuff as it relates to the services we're offering. So I hope that is
Just to follow up, Your Honor, hoping that they'll get the 1.7 or at least a significant portion of it. If we were to make up a differential on that, depending on where our budgeting is, where expenditures and revenues are, is that something also that we could draw from fund balance, or looking at certain line items that we have where we can squeeze out a few more dollars?
No, I would counsel this council not to draw out fund balance. What we have done is we've done a long-term strategic analysis of the Board of Ed budget, and we've looked at every single line item and looked at the 7-year history of expenditures. We presented the board with a list of, I wouldn't call them cuts, I would call them adjustments in certain line items that we think we can be able to make it up. I mean, it's all going to depend on how much we're talking about. Again, I don't see that as happening. What is a greater risk, I think, is if they just blow up the whole program and say, we're not giving you any more money because we've got, $300 million deficit, so we're not, that's my biggest fear. If that money is allocated, we'll get it. But we would not draw that. We would have to sit down again with his team at the finance office, with the superintendent, and start looking at some of the transfers that are going on just to make it whole. So that's our plan.
Above through the chair, I believe the finance director, acting finance director of the Board of Ed is here. This may be a more appropriate question for him. Is the 1.7, I apologize if I didn't pick up on this at the workshop. I don't believe it is, but it could confirm or not whether or not the 1.7 million is already earmarked, or if it is received, it will then be utilized for new programs or new features of existing programs. Or are those dollars already counted on in any particular way, earmarks or otherwise, in the current budget that the Board of Ed is going to vote on, I understand, within the next 2 weeks?
It's earmarked for full-day kindergarten in one phase. We'll have a list of all those requirements at the budget at our next board meeting. But it's above and beyond. There's 8 new positions in there that we need, 3 science teachers, ESL teachers, so that's above and beyond. That's why as we bring down the achievement gap so we can make it narrow, that's why the 1.7 million, we have to report that to the governor to get that money. So it's above and beyond what we have in our budget.
Additional dollars on top of the current budget?
Correct. We'll have that list as you were at the last meeting, they wanted that list and they'll have it for Wednesday.
Thank you.
Mr. Cheney.
Thank you, Your Honor. I too attended that last Board of Ed meeting, and one of the things that surprised me as a puzzle was that they were able to negotiate their health benefits by reducing it by $700,000. By going on to the state plan, which starts July 1. So my question is to the finance director here, has the city looked into that same plan? And can we also utilize the same savings that they did?
We have looked into the plan a couple of years ago, but we're still looking at fine tuning our rates. Keep in mind, our plan didn't change until October, so we're still negotiating our rates. We put an amount in the budget that we feel comfortable with. However, we're looking to try to fine tune the rates with Cigna right now. And if that doesn't work well for us at Cigna, we will put it out to bid and get a lower rate. And if that means going to the state, we'll do that too.
The biggest problem we have with the state plan specifically, two problems. One is that it's a different plan design than what our employees, we just negotiate. So we have to go back to each of our unions and get them to agree to take the state plan, which would require negotiation. Now, once the union hears that you're saving $700,000, they're going to want to, they're going to want to trade something off because they're going to perceive that money as well. We're not going to save us money. We got to do something for us. So that's a problem for us. Secondly is, when the last time we looked at it, they don't give you a blended rate. Right now, the reason our rate is where it is because we blend in our retirees with our active, and that keeps the rate down for all the people that participate in our medical. The school board, they have a slightly different situation. They only offer COBRA. They don't have to offer retiree medical. We, for years, have offered that. We don't have. We changed that, but as you know, but we still have a legacy out there of retirees that are receiving health care from the city. So in order to keep our rates down, they don't give you a blended rate at the state. They only look at your active employees. So on paper, it looks really good, but when you add in the retirees, the springs pop out of it and actually costs you more. Having said that, we're going to continue to negotiate with Cigna. We did our heavy lifting last year. We switched from Anthem to Cigna, and that's where we're, in this budget, that's where we were able to save some money. That we won't find that kind of savings again this year, but it doesn't mean we roll over and just pay what they give us. We're going to negotiate with them, beat up on them as much as we can. Further discussion of the education program. Seeing none, then I'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. In opposition, raise your hands. Mr. Schneider, Mr. Visconti, Mr. Perkins, and Mr. Okay, item D, Antonio's playpen. I mean, the Public Works budget. That would be, let's see, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to receive the Public Works report and adopt the committee's recommendation.
Motion made, seconded by Mr. Negershaw. Discussion under the Public Works budget report. Specifically related to Public Works. Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on acceptance of the report. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Negatives, please raise your hand. I don't know what you did. Everybody wants a hamburger.
Thank you.
Item E, Health and Housing, Public Safety, Welfare, and Social Services Budget Report. Mr. Knapp.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to receive the Health, Housing, Public Safety, and Social Services Report and adopt the committee's recommendation.
Second. Made and seconded by Mr. Rotella. Discussion under Health and Housing, Public Safety, Welfare, Social Services Budget Report. Anything specific to police, fire? Yes, Mr. Knapp.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to take the opportunity to mention a couple of our departments that really go out of their way to get grants during the course of the year. I said it at the ad hoc committee, and I'll mention it again here. Part of my duties as legislative leader is to type up a consent calendar that we get to read at every meeting. And when you do that, you get to notice who's getting grant monies for the city and who's, I shouldn't say who's not, but who's really working hard, diligently to get those grant monies. Scott Leroy from the Health and Housing Department and Paul Estefan from our Civil Preparedness and the Airport Commission really go out of their way to do some hard work for the grants that this city gets and saves us in the hundreds of thousands, and I'm sure closer to the $1 million range when it comes to the monies that they've gotten. No disrespect to the other departments that have done the work, but these two gentlemen really need a pat on the back for the amount of work that they do through their departments to gain money so that the taxpayers don't get to succumb to that burden. So I thank both of them and thank you for the opportunity.
Commission, have further discussion on this particular budget? Seeing none, then I'll try your mind for acceptance. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition, raise your hand. Motion carries unanimously. Guess nobody wants to get pulled over by the chief. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to make. Mr. Connell.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that City Council adopt the ordinance making appropriations for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2012, and ending June 30th, 2013, along with the resolution that sets the mill rate for that same time period of 22.45 mils.
Thank you, Mr. Connell. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Seaver. At this time, we'll have a discussion in general related to the local ordinance. We can start in the corner. We'll start with Mr. Sheehan, see the front.
Thank you, Mayor. On the contingency part, so this question to the finance director, it says operating transfer out on animal control, $266,000. Can you explain that? Is that already earmarked for the animal control?
Yeah, that's not a new line item. We do that every year as a transfer to support the animal control fund. It really is, when it's in contingency, that just, it's summarized under contingency, but if you look at the detail of the budget, you'll see it separated as an animal control transfer.
Further, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Through you to Mr. St. Hilaire. First, publicly, I'd like to thank Mr. St. Hilaire for all the effort that he's put into supplying me with all of the extra questions that I've asked about the entire budget and spending time with me to go over these items. I thank you very much for that, David. In looking through this budget, and the mayor made a comment earlier, it hasn't fallen on deaf ears. I'm not sure that it applies to what I want to try to do here, but if it does, I apologize, Your Honor. At any rate, when I looked at the vacant budget funded items, the vacant positions, with benefits and everything included, it's about $3.2 million. And the thought occurred to me that if we could fund all of those positions at half their full value, half, because I don't think July 1st is going to go online. That may happen, but I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, what's going on? We got a 15-second, I heard no one budget much, the 15-second tapes. You're doing a good job.
Am I okay?
Please proceed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So that would take $1.6 million out of the budget. And with the numbers that you and I have worked out through the last few months, just to be able to ballpark and put things into perspective, if you use the number of $800,000, moving the mill rate, a tenth of a mill, that comes out to about $10 per $100,000 of net net assessment on someone's property. So if we have 1.6 million, that would be $20 per 100,000. So on a house like mine, $200,000 house, it would save our family $40 a year. Now, it doesn't sound like a big but it's still $40 a year. And when the mayor has used the term, we're on an unsustainable path. And I like that term because my house is on an unsustainable path that if I project out 7 years, I'll be paying, maybe sooner, $104 a week for taxes on my house. And if you were to walk up to our house, you'd say, if you look at all these numbers, and that all makes sense. You look at the house and you go, I don't understand it. So that's kind of what's driving me here. So what I would then suggest, and this is going back to the mayor's comment, is if we could take, as those positions come online, if we could fund them out of the fund balance, And let's just go on the premise that at the end of the year, not everything is filled. We just backfill that money back to we just pass that back into the fund balance, shore that back up. And my thought would be the following year, based upon what the fund balance would have been at the end of 2012, 2013, we make that adjustment in the taxes. Now, this may sound like a Rod Peter, big ball kind of thing, but you don't know what's going to come online in the course of the year. So that's kind of where I'm thinking on this. Okay.
Could you explain that?
No, you got this? I got it.
Thank you.
It was actually part of the lesson.
Okay, go ahead. You're fine, go ahead.
All right, that's it.
So we have,
I hope everybody followed that, but I want to say a good idea. Good idea. We currently do that. If you look at the personnel salary savings line, that's exactly what it does. It takes those funded positions and it offsets those funded positions with a negative. All right? So it reduces that budget, and then if you look at employee service benefit, it partially funds it. Now, those unbudgeted positions, those are completely struck out of the budget. That's a $2.5 million savings in total between salaries and benefits. Those positions are not going to be filled. The other ones that we talked about, those other 36 positions, those are only partially funded, not fully funded, but partially funded, because we do offset that with the personnel salary savings. We didn't really get into that too much this afternoon, but that's exactly what that does. It does exactly what you're talking about there, because we recognize the fact that those positions are not going to be filled on day one.
So, this is the part that I missed. Are we, if I look at the budget of $220 million, are there $3.2 million in that budget, in that $220 million?
If you add up all those personnel salary savings lines, you probably reduce it by maybe $1.5 million. Now, keep in mind, much of that is, we don't do a significant amount of reduction in police and fire, because we don't want to leave ourselves short.
It's a policy decision that I made.
It's a public safety decision.
And I fully am on board with that. I fully understand that, and I fully understand because I've been beat up here for 3 years about not trying to touch the fund balance because it looks good when the credit bureau comes in. So, I'm up to speed on all of that, but it still leaves me a little uncertain about, if I look at a budget and it says, we want to tax you at $220 million, and you say, well, we're not taxing you at $220 million, we're taxing you at $218.5 million. So I'm confused.
I would just ask you to open up your budget and look at, police, for example, and you'll see the regular salary line, and underneath that, you'll see a personnel salary savings offset, which is a negative number. So you really have to look at the sum of the two to understand, that's personnel salary savings is a reduction of their budget.
Right, so if you think of this engineer, if you didn't do that, and you made the assumption everybody's going to be hired by July 1, you would be taxed at $221.5 million. That's how we got to 220, was by making that reduction.
In summary, we do not fund our positions, all the vacant positions that we intend to fill. We do not fully fund.
We know we won't.
Period.
Hire everybody. We know. So we make an assumption in the budget. That's why if we were to do it straight and say, okay, every person in here is going to be completely funded, have insurance and everything else, you'd be 221.5.
And we started that, when the economy started getting difficult. We started that 3 years ago.
That was not always a practice.
Keep the tax rates low.
Not always a practice. So you're right. We're both in the right church. We're sitting at the right church.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion.
Further discussion? Mr. Sadi.
Thank you, Your Honor. So basically saying that what Councilman Nero was getting at was something that makes sense and has not always been done, but is being done. I just want to highlight things, if I understand this correctly, I'm just looking at page, for example, engineering department proposed operating budget on page 198, a line item that says personnel salary savings, and there's $70,001. That's what you're referring to. And so that $70,001 is not included in the overall budget. That is a reduction in the total amount of expenditures than revenues. And just to be clear, the $3.2 million that Councilman Nero spoke about to fund those 34 positions or 29, whatever the 36 positions. You're saying that now, that personnel salary savings,
That's asset number, and that's what we really didn't get into in our conversation. So that was, as we're talking about it, we didn't really get into that discussion this afternoon.
Okay. What I just want to show, I wrote down here, is that approximately 1.5 million is not in the budget because of this personal salary savings. And that's based on the scenario that Mr. Nero outlined. People understand that.
That's the kind of, Mr. Nero, that's that they're making that news. So I'm glad you for all the work you've done. Seeing that, Mr. Sadi, for the second time.
Well, I never yielded to it.
Oh, I think you did, but your second
I
time.
have a question.
You got the
Following on with what Mr. Nero said, and understanding that obviously it's difficult budgeting, and it's difficult for council members here with full-time jobs or part-time jobs and many other things going on in their life to, I don't have a question yet, but it's open. It's especially difficult in tough economic times. It's easier for us when we have a lot of revenue coming in, when our investments are doing well and permits are doing well. We have a finite amount of resources, and we prioritize education, public safety, infrastructure, and this. In past years, I've expressed my concern with certain funding going to private or quasi-private, quasi-public entities, certain entities and within our city, regional entities, also concerned with both union and non-unionized raises. And those have not always been popular positions to take, and some meetings have had texts sent to me that, why are you doing this to us? But while not popular, all the elected officials up here, the mayor and others, have an obligation to do what we each feel is best for our city. And setting policy and course of action going forward. There are obviously going to be times, as we do, disagree and argue, and some people want Saudi to shut up, and I want other people to be quiet, but we don't. We listen, we debate, we disagree and debate, and that's not bad. It's really the heart of a democracy, and I apologize for getting too philosophical a bit here, but I think what's important here is being able to ask these questions, go through a budget, debate and disagree, and then leave it dies. Leave a meeting, understanding that we're all doing our best, even though we may have reasonable disagreements on how to get there. All that being said, and the comments that I made in the Government One Committee, I asked some questions about raises or mid-year adjustments. When I compared this year's current budget, current salaries with non-unionized employees after hearing some discussion or statements at the public hearing, with the proposed budget, they look the same. I then went back to the online and posted budget, same there, and compared those salaries to last year's approved budget, and they were different. There was some discussion in that, and the mayor explained that all very well in the Government One Committee, how those budget adjustments were made within existing appropriations and savings, and I apologize for misrepresenting your words. But what I stated at the meeting was I still had a concern with voting for, in this budget, for raises that I would not have voted for in last year's budget. I can't speak for others as to whether they feel the same way. And I know it's not a large amount of money, and I know some people may be upset, but given how tight things are, and with the potential for having to come up with other dollars possibly down the road for certain contingencies, I just can't support those current raises at this time. The people deserve it. Just told the teachers who said, I have 3 degrees. You don't think I deserve the salary? I'm not saying you don't deserve it. There's a finite amount of money in order to provide these salaries. So with that, I would move to defund the non-union raises, with the exception of any increases in salary line items related to the change in classification, such as foreman, change in classification, or because somebody who was hired mid-year, that salary line item may have been lower and needs to be higher this year because they've been paid throughout the entire year.
There's been a motion to take away the raises for the non-union employees. Is there a second to that motion? Second. Seconded as made by Mr. Merrill. Is there a discussion? Mr. Howard, and then Mr. Lee.
I got to repeat it.
Oh, yes you do. So I need the record to show that Mr. Curran for this particular part should be, sorry, Mr. Curran, recuse himself. Mr. Gowsey.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have the utmost respect for my colleague, Mr. Sadi, but I certainly could not ever support the amendment that is being proposed currently to defund the non-union employees. And I'll base that on several factors, and I'd like to ask Mr. St. Clair if he can just verify some of my information for me. Mr. St. Clair, the raises total, mid-year raises total to the non-union employees, if I'm not mistaken, was in the area of about $80,000.
That's correct.
And when was how long did those employees, non-union, go without raises?
2009-10. That was the last, actually it was before that, 8-9. That was the last fiscal year that the non-union got a raise. So I recently, you want me to expand upon that?
If you would.
The comparison between the raises, all the raises across the board, across the city, between different classes, right, and union, non-union. And since that time, since 2009-10, because that was the area in question, the non-union, got a raise this year. Well, that amounted to $80,000. But during that same period of time, the non-union got raises up to $2.5 million. That equated to 2.5. And they got 3 raises during that time, and the union got 1 raise. The union got 7.5%, and the non-union got 2.75%. And that was
for 6 months period.
Yeah, a few months ago.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Moore. If I could just follow up with Ms. Lasker Warner. Lasker Warner, thank you. One of my concerns, and I wondered if you could verify it, how long do employees stay, non-union employees generally stay in employment when they start not receiving raises year after year? I mean, do we have a risk or run a risk of losing employees by not offering raises if other places are being more competitive?
If other places are being more competitive, yes. When we're in the economy, you have to look to see if that's truly happening.
And do we occasionally have people come in and look at our non-union employees for their salaries comparable to other towns, municipalities, our size and budget size, and say, hey, you're on track or you're not on track? Or,
yes.
Okay. So, my fear there, thank you, my fear there would be that we would just wind up dropping backwards so far that eventually someone will come in and say, look, you're not competitive, and you're not going to be able to stay competitive, and you're going to lose good people. And I like our non-union staff. I think that they do a tremendous job for a fair amount of pay, but I think there are some adjustments that can be made to them. And I think a lot of them do above and beyond, and I can start naming them, and I'm looking at a lot of them right here in this room tonight. And, you know, I wouldn't want to lose you, because I know that your time and your efforts go way beyond what you get paid for. And there's a dedication to the city that comes with that. And I'm happy that you got the mid-year raise. I'm glad that the mayor, Your Honor, could you tell me, how did you manage to squeak that out, by the way?
Well, you know, thank you. I'm going to give you the hammer just in case there. I appreciate you asking that question. What had happened is, and I think some of the non-union folks back there could attest to this, they went 4 years without a raise. At the same time, as Mr. Saylor was telling you, at the same time, most people on this dais voted for union contracts that gave raises. I just brought 3 contracts in front of you, and they all went through unanimously. And let me tell you what that means. Next year, these folks aren't getting a raise, but your union counterparts are. You approved $688,000 in raises for your union folks. And the quickest way you're going to turn non-union people into union people is keep waiting 4 years every time that they do an increase. So what did I do? I went back to them, I met with my management advisory team, and I said, look, you guys want raises? You got to find the money. You can't let them just find $80,000. You got to find me significant savings for me to fund the raises. And they did that. They came back in with several $100,000 worth of savings out of the current year budget. So I wanted to be clear to our taxpayers that they won't have to pay additional raise. But what I find ironic here is that we're having a discussion about that, and we just sailed 3 contracts through. Everybody said no problem. We had a teacher's contract that didn't even come up here for a vote. Everybody voted not to take no action. $1.4 million in raises. I'm not even saying the teacher shouldn't get it. I'm a teacher, so if I ever go back there, I want my raise. Oh, I'm just kidding. But in all sincerity, nobody said anything. It was okay then. And I think there's a real disparity in equity and how we treat people. We have to be very careful. You're just asking for a lawsuit. That doesn't mean everybody should get a raise all the time. I don't believe municipal employment means you get a raise no matter what. And I have to say that in the past, I based raises on merit pay on the kind of job that the individual is doing. I didn't like that system, and I like that system. It's worked well here for the last 11 years. But I understand frustrations and concerns. I'm concerned about the escalating cost of government too. And part of the challenge that we have as a council, as the mayor, is that we live in the bluest of blue states. There's a rule in state statute for every single thing we do. The contracts you approved, I don't quarrel with the fact that you approved them, I would have voted for them too. Because if you go to arbitration, we're going to lose those arbitrations. And we're going to have to pay more raises. So I think that's part of a bigger issue that we really can't necessarily solve right here. But I think that what we did for the non-union people is fair, it was equitable. And again, we didn't program raises for next year. However, if they come back with $1 million worth of raises, $1 million worth of savings, because they've come up with some magical way of doing things, then we can certainly look at that. So you have
Thank you, Your Honor. And there's not a whole lot I can add to what you've already said, except we're dealing with a $220 million budget. I would be more than happy to listen to a plan to save a few $1 million on this budget without running a risk of pushing people into an organized labor situation, which I know in the past is serviced here. And certainly those non-union people can do as they wish. I'm not saying I would prevent that from happening, but certainly in the overall scope of things, to even vote no against a budget of this magnitude on the basis of an $80,000 raise, it just doesn't make sense to me. I would be happier to listen to overtures on, which would have taken place perhaps in committee or in private meetings with the finance director, that would set out to reduce the budget a meaningful amount, not something that is tertiary. We approve grants here, and we fund those grants right and left with amounts of hundreds and thousands of dollars. Here, basically, we're talking about chump change. And I just don't see where anybody could vote against an overall budget on the basis of $80,000.
Thank you, Mr. Seaver. You're on the amendment, we're not on the main motion. So motion to make the questions of second. Second. Second, Mr. Hagershad. All in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposition, raise your hand. Okay, so it will be Mr. Sadi, Mr. Muir, Mr. Perkins, and Mr. Botello, and Mr. Chivas. At this time, we're on to the amendment of defunding the raises. All in favor of defunding the raises to the non-union staff, signify by saying aye. Aye. All in favor? I confused myself. All opposed, signify by saying nay. Nay. Okay, well, the ayes, raise your hands. Okay, that would be Mr. Botello, Mr. Shinichi, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Miro, Mr. Sadi. Motion fails. We're back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Mr. Sadi, you've had the floor twice. Any other discussion? Mr. Lee.
Your Honor, I would make a motion that we move the question. I think everybody's had sufficient time, either in committee or on the floor here, to discuss the main motion.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Hagershad. All in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. In the negative, raise your hand. Nay. Mrs. T, Mr. Skaz, Mr. Botello, Mr. Kern. You're back on the floor. And your vote on moving the question, Mr. Kern?
No.
Mr. Kern's in the negative. Let's see here. Let's try this again. Mrs. T, Mr. Skaz, Mr. Botello, Mr. Shinichi, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Nero, and Mr. Sadi. And this is Mr. Kern and Mrs. Sadi. 9, motion passes 11-9. This time we're on the main motion. All in favor of item 12, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And nays, raise your hand, please. Okay, then Mr. Botello, Mr. Shinichi, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Nero, and Mr. Sadi. Madam Clerk, I'm sorry, 13.
Item 13, ordinance. An ordinance appropriating $3 million for public improvements in the 2012-2013 capital budget and authorizing the issuance of 3 million bonds of the city to meet said appropriations and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With your pleasure, Council. Mr. Knapp.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to receive the communication and approve an ordinance appropriating $3 million for public improvement projects in the 2012-2013 capital budget and authorizing the issuance of $3 million bonds of the city to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose.
Second. Made second. Mr. Hagershad. Discussion related to item 13. Mr. Shinichi.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to split the question.
Second. Motion made to divide the question. In what way, Mr. Shinichi?
Individual. There'll be 4 motions for each item separate. Yeah, we vote on each one separate.
So you're suggesting we vote on raising the highway department equipment as one item, paving Drainage Road 2, city buildings and repairs 3, Charles River Authority for pavilion repairs as 4. Is that your motion? Was there a second to that motion? Seconded by Mr. Perkins. Discussion about dividing the question. Okay, all those in favor of dividing the question, why don't you raise your hands? Mr. Botello, Mr. Shinichi, Mr. Perkins, and Mr. Sadi. Okay. Motion fails. At this time, we're back with the main motion for discussion. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you.
I've been on record a couple times before stating my displeasure with using long-term funding to pay for equipment, police cars, fire trucks, other types of vehicles, long-term, and also having to, I think they should be in a department's budget, and also using a bond to finance those things. You know, I would, parade folks up, but I know what kind of response I get. I probably hear that some of the equipment that's being used now is probably older than me, which that could be the case because it's not that old. I'd also probably hear that, for example, get a home sold to me by a real estate agent. 30 years I go back to her, 20 years I go back, I say, my house fell down. She said, yeah, but you got a really great rate on it. All right, same thing here. The equipment that we're buying really doesn't last as long as the amount of funding, so I think that's why it's a good idea to have broken some of these items out. But I do know that, a lot of this highway equipment is important. I'm not prepared to vote against it, but it really should have been broken out. In addition to that, I've said that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Other discussion related to these changes?
Thank you, Your Honor. During the public hearing, the meeting was mentioned of Child Arts Authority ownership of that pavilion. Can the Corporation Council give us the actual owner of that pavilion?
Ownership of authority properties in the city.
So the pavilion's on the city property, it's on West Connecticut.
It's on state property. It's not West Coast property, it's state property.
State property, that's state. So the state owns the property, but we own the actual pavilion.
We own the assets. Right. Including an acre and a half. Any other discussion? Mr. Piscopo.
Thank you, Your Honor. Through the chair to Finance Director. Where do we stand with bonding right now as far as the city?
In which way?
Where do we stand as far as bonding?
What are we looking at as far as making bonds now?
Where do we stand as far as our bonded indebtedness, Mr. St.
Well, our rating is just about as high as you can get. It's AAA when we go out for bonding, which means we get an excellent rate. We've just about issued all that we have authorized to issue. And just, if I may, a point of clarification in regards to Councilman Vitello's the statement that was made earlier, Perkins. By statute, but we cannot issue a bond longer than the useful life of any item on there. So, for example, a roof may have a 20-year useful life. Our bonds only go out for 20 years, by the way. So the roof may have a longer useful life, but the bond can only go out for 20 years. A truck may have a 7 to 10-year useful life. So we can only bond out for 7 or 10 years. If it's any other type of equipment, we have to go out for as long as the useful life of the equipment. So, to say that we're going out beyond, we're still paying on this equipment longer than its useful life, or as long since we've disposed of it, is not an accurate statement. So what we do is, when we're issuing these bonds, we are issuing serial bonds. So that's the point of clarification. We just smooth out the payments over a certain period of time. We're winding down all the amount that we're issuing. We'll go out again this year for approximately $15 million and some band. That'll be the long-term portion, which is bonds. We'll go out for some bands for probably about $5 million or less. And that'll just about do it. All right, and that's why, if you notice in your bond packet, you notice that we peak out as far as our percentage around next year. So,
thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to thank David for that explanation. It's one thing to ask your descendants to pay for something that they're going to use, like a park permit or a lake improvement or something like that. It 50 or 75 years down the road, they're still using it. It's obviously a very different thing to ask them to pay for things they're no longer using the work disposal, so thank you. I didn't know that.
Thank you, Mr. O'Tell. Further discussion? Seeing none, then Mayor. Secret. You want to resubmit the motion on this one? All right, you want to meet? All right, we're gonna take a 2-minute break. Shift to the table.
What people were saying, where's that $3 million? That was the ERA money that we get, and we had to credit the city for that.
Can you explain what that is?
Exactly. I hate to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
We're green. This is
No,
okay.
Under Obama's, what would you call it?
So federal money, federal grant?
Federal money, right.
So as I'm to understand it from Richard, it was basically late coming from us, so we borrowed from the city.
Well, that's different. That's different. The city received probably about $6 million over 2 years. And what they did with it, there was an agreement between different cities and boards of ed of how you dealt with the money. They credited, we gave them the money, $3 million, and they credited our accounts, mostly a payroll account for that $3 million. So at the end of the year, if you I'll give you the budget out, it was $3 million less actual because we had to give the $3 million back, and they credited our accounts with that. So that was the ERA money. It was used for salaries, and I wasn't here, so that...
It was designed to put people back to work from the Obama administration because of the economic conditions. So we knew that we could either turn it down and not have that opportunity or take it, but realize that it was going to be a finite window to it. So the decision was made, let's take it, and at least for a couple of years, it's going to help us go forward.
But it
We have a motion on the floor, and I guess everybody, it was like nothing, so don't worry. I just want to be clear that when Mr. Shinichi moved, I'm just going to share this with him during our discussion. When Mr. Shinichi moved to divide the question, it is the sense of the body to make the determination of the question should be divided. In this case, we took a vote regarding whether this video polling and the question should not be divided. You say, Mr. Pinter, making sure that I could move it, it's not easily divisible. And just for future reference, not to belabor the point, if the ordinance was divided that way, you would have to go back to the just so.
It hasn't been tested that much, but since the body voted, they decided the question of whether
So, I'm still going to guess if there's any slides. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, any other discussion related to Act 15? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Nays, raise your hand. Motion passes. Item 14.
Department sewer rates as of July 1st, 2012.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to recommend the adoption of the proposed amendments to Code of Ordinance, Section 16-4 and Section 16-32.
Motion been made and seconded by Mr. Seabury. Any discussion as it relates to item 14? Discussion. Seeing none, Mr. Stoddard.
Thank you, Your Honor. With regard to minimum use charges, come up several times. Public products, council. I don't know if I should direct that to.
Mr. Earl, you sit in the back, he's wearing pink.
Come up here tonight.
David is a lot more familiar with the sewer rates.
Mr. David.
My question is just the basis for it, not saying it's right or wrong necessarily, but just to understand it a little bit.
Your question, the flat rate fee, is that really what your question is?
Let's do it for this minimum use charge, flat rate fee, whatever.
Well, this rate structure has been in place for quite some time, so we do have a cost of service study which we are presently embarking on, which we will look at rate design and rate structure. So I really, forefathers before me set this up. So all I can say is we can look into that as we do the cost of service study. But the purpose of a flat rate fee is that ultimately you want all customers to be metered. So if someone isn't metered, you have to establish a flat rate fee. Mr. Gardner's question I did hear, and we can look into that.
The way it was explained to me at one time, not in its exact context, but similar to the public utility and state level context, is there's a certain cost to the delivery of the service, notwithstanding whether you use a gallon or 100 gallons. So to capture that cost, rather than having a different rate, let's say on your electric bill, you have your service provider fee, or I'm using the right nomenclature, and then you have your wattage fee, how much you actually use. It's been explained to me that it's something similar to that. You have to capture the cost of the infrastructure and the delivery, and then you tack onto that the use. So it gets rolled in if you use more than the minimum charge or flat rate, whatever you want to say. But if you don't use more than that, you pay that cost of the actual provision of the public utility.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there's a minimum fixed fee.
I should ask myself a question. No, I'm just kidding. I just want to make sure that I was understanding it correctly.
Your explanation was correct.
But the review that you plan on doing is going to look at that.
It's going to look at our rate structure. I mean, that may help answer the question previously posed.
You know, I'm just going to interject here. Anytime we do these rate structure fees, they're never pretty. Those studies are never pretty, and when I present them to the council, you're not going to want to see what they're asking for, because we are so historically low on sewer and water.
The reason I bring that up is we can look at that specific topic of how you establish a flat rate fee.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Rotella.
Direct this to you, Your Honor. If we just run through this, I'm looking at a $10 increase in Section A. I'm looking at a $100 increase in Section 1A, a $30 increase in Section 1B, and maybe a $140 increase in Section 1B. The reason I bring it up is because with these strike-throughs and whatnot, they've left sometimes $1,000 in script, and they've done a strike-through. So in some instances, it looks like we've gone from $750 to $1,700 or $1,800, but that's not the case. We're actually, these increases are I don't want to say they're insubstantial, but they don't appear to be as large as they do at a cursory examination. So I am correct on that. The first one's a $10 increase. Yes. The second one is it looks like a slightly less than a $100 increase. The third one's about $30, and the fourth one's around $140. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds. All those in favor of item 14, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Mr. Perkins, no.
Abstain.
And Mr. Scott abstains. Madam Clerk, item 15, Mr. Scott. Sorry, Joe.
And 15, ordinance, water rates as of July 1st, 2012.
What's your pleasure, council? Mr. Seaver.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to accept the communication and adopt the ordinance establishing the quarterly non-metered rates for the use of water, which rate shall be in effect for all bills rendered on or after July 1, 2012, $279.22 per unit.
Thank you. Second by Mr. Neckerson. Is there any discussion related to this item? None, then I'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Mr. Scarafava? Abstains, respectfully. And Mr. Perkins votes no. Okay, Mr. President, Department returns.
Your Honor, I make a motion to waive reading of the department reports. All members have copies are on file. Assistance office.
Motion made, seconded by Mr. Negrishev. Discussion on the department reports. Mrs. Stanley.
I was just wondering if Mr. Stillman can elaborate on what's going on Pleasant Street?
Pleasant
How we're
Street.
handling it? It doesn't sound pleasant. Doesn't sound pleasant.
I was made aware of the situation in Pleasant Street Monday morning when I came into work. Apparently the complaint was several cars blocking up the road, noise, a lot of people, even a complaint of a hot dog vendor who was even there. So I learned about this Monday morning when coming into work. So it's causing stress, obviously, in the neighborhood. I haven't received complaints about this property in around 2 years. So, not that it's a new occurrence, but I haven't had a complaint about this property in 2 years, other than the occasional front yard parking, smaller things. So, the next question I assume you might ask is what can the unit do about it, what can the police department do about it? I'll be meeting with the property owner to discuss the burden that it's causing on the neighborhood and figure out a way to make it not happen again. Certainly, hot dog vendors, that's for sure. I'll be there this weekend as well to follow up and check it out to make sure that it's not happening. Members of the council, the mayor, other department heads, other employees, several residents have asked me, what can the city do about this? What can the union do about this? What can the police department do about this? There isn't an ordinance against this type of get-together. When there's illegal parking, we can tow vehicles, we can ticket vehicles, we can have vehicles move. If there's a noise ordinance, the noise is too high, certainly the police can be called and break the party up. But for continual get-togethers at some of these residences, I'm sure we'd all love to be able to put an ordinance together where we could limit this type of activity. And I would encourage your group to help empower my department, police department, or any other departments that be to figure out a way where we can curb this type of activity because it's causing a major quality of life disruption for many neighborhoods around town.
You said that this happened on Pleasant Street 2 years ago?
The last time I received
Was it the same house? Was it the same?
It was the same house.
And so what did you do 2 years ago that stopped it from happening, and now it's happening again?
You go there, you talk to the tenants, you talk to the property owners to say, hey, come on, look around, you're causing disturbance to the neighborhood, neighbors are complaining, they're not happy with you. And many property owners and tenants are respectful of that, and many just simply don't care.
One of the houses in question, Mrs. Stanley, are 5 Pleasant and 7 Pleasant. I will tell you that one of the best strategies we've used is get a hold of the landlord, call the landlord into City Hall, and sit down with them and kind of go over the activity. Oftentimes you're not aware, or if we go straight to the tenants, sometimes there's a language challenge, sometimes folks are transient, they may not live there in a couple months, but going to the landlord to say, look, I know this is really important. The other piece is that's why I came to you guys with that ordinance. I'm light, but I want to beef up a little bit. I think it's 7 is in significant disrepair. There's grass overgrown. It's house falling apart. So part of this would be to but there's a landlord collecting the rent for these folks every month. So obviously they've got to put some money back into the property. So I'm sure Mr. Stillman also plans on meeting with the landlord.
One more question. So when they called up your message on Sunday, the resident called and left a message on a Sunday and there was nobody around to respond on Sundays?
We did, actually. I got an email on Sunday as well. I forwarded it to Mr. Stillman. She had your cell phone number. So she called you. The cruiser did go out there, but they didn't report the kind of activity that was being reported to us. Now, it could have just been that they got there too late and everybody had already left, but we did send the police cruiser out there.
And police officer also did respond. At that time, not the offender. He wasn't there any longer. But again, cars were at that time legally parked. And there really wasn't much else that the officers do to.
I think we got there.
I know if there's cars parked on the street, the police officers can ticket them for blocking the streets, because I know I'm in business. And if my truck is on the street, I will get a ticket or be asked to hire police officers for that sort of, for being there for 10 minutes. So, I mean, there's a lot of things already on the books that we can use, I think, to curtail this activity.
I think in this case, the cop just got there too late. I think by the time we responded, most people had left. So there were a few cars legally parked. You could drive up and down. You could get a fire truck through. I think we just missed it. So I think we got to put this on the radar for the next couple of weekends.
Yeah, I think everybody should have the right to do their property.
Absolutely. But do it respectfully.
Absolutely.
Mr. Howell?
What would take I can see having a being in yard one. If this becomes a weekly thing, that's a no.
Yeah, we went down that road. I ended up being deposed about that for about 3 hours. So here's what I can tell you is that the most effective tool we found is to meet directly with the owner of the house. We haven't done that yet here. And then escalate our enforcement, right? So I think we have enough tools in our toolbox now to get on top of this. Last time we had a major outbreak of these kinds of recurring group activities, we were able to work with the community, to work with the property owners, to get most of them shut down. There were maybe 2 at the end that we just wouldn't listen to anybody. We turned those over to the chief. The chief put together a mini task force, and we got them shut down. Not to say that you can't enjoy your property, you can, but if you can't enjoy your property like that, it's just like a mountain. Everybody else is trying to say this. So, Mr. Seabury.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to publicly recognize Leo Noel and his department. He came to my neighborhood with some issues that neighbors had, and came several times to my knowledge. Through his guidance, he was able to rectify the situation that could have gone completely out of hand, and I would just simply like to thank him publicly. Thanks so much for your help.
Thank you, Mr. Seabury. Any discussion of the monthly reports? Mr. Cowell.
Your Honor, thank you. If I could just sort of a little off track, I just want to say thank you to the council for the great job they did. The meetings were attended almost flawlessly, and we appreciate that. And I want to just thank David, the mayor, David's staff for a tremendous job and the work that they do, put the budget together for the city this coming year. Thank you.
Never easy to ask for greater contributions, but I think we present as tight a budget as we possibly can. Any other discussions on the department reports? If then I'll try your minds to get the reports. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any objection, motion carries unanimously. We have you want to go back and do that? You want to clarify? We just want to clarify that Mr. Seabury's motion, which was to amend a whole series of the code because the rates are affected throughout the code. So, Mr. Seabury, if you can just read this off for us.
Just to clarify, Mr. Seabury's motion referenced one section. There are 4 more. They should all be captured in order to adopt the ordinance.
Okay.
If I understand this correctly, Les would want me to...
A little louder, quick. All you're doing is you're, in addition to amending the first...
What I had already said, you want me to get before.
In addition, I amended...
In addition to my pre-stated motion, I'd also like to include the approval of codes 21-46, 21-47, 21-48, 21-49.
Okay, department reports have been accepted. We've got 2 add-on items. So I'll entertain a motion to add on, Mr. Cabo.
I'd like to make a motion at this time that we add item number 17 as an add-on, which is appointment of independent auditors, and item number 18, which we will retire into executive session for the purposes of discussion of the 13 acres real property.
Second was made and seconded. All those in favor of item 17, which is the appointment of independent auditors, and item 18, which is a discussion of acquisition of sale of real property, 13 acres on Old Bridge Road. Signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition to those two items have been added. Just before we go to 17, for the executive session, Mr. Volpe, I need you to stay. Can you stay for the executive session, please? Mr. Tamala, can you stay? Mr. Shepard, your legal staff, Mr. St. Hilaire, and actually I'm going to need Mr. Ferguson as well. Okay, in the executive session. No, you can't. And Mr. I think we're good. Any, okay, item 17.
Appointment of independent. To Honorable Mark Boughton from David St. Hilaire, Director of Finance. Once again, it is time for the City of Danbury to consider the appointment of its auditors to perform the city audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2012. Previously, the city signed a contract with McGadry and Bullen to perform the audit for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2010, with the option exercisable by the city of auditing its financial statement for each of the 4 subsequent fiscal years. McGadry and Pullen has performed the independent audit/accounting services for the city over the last 12 years and has done an outstanding job. As such, the City Council is respectfully requested to approve the reappointment of McGadry and Pullen as the city independent auditors for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2012, as required by the city charter and the state statutes. Please feel free to contact me should you require any additional information.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's your pleasure, Council? Mr. Levy?
Your Honor, I make a motion that we receive the communication, take the option of renewal as outlined in the communication of the appointment of independent auditors.
It was made and seconded by Mr. Curry. Any discussion about the appointment of independent auditors? It's simply an extension of the existing contract, exercising the mandate. Seeing none, then I'll try your minds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. We're going to move into executive session at this point. Department heads, they have to call up the hall.